songbirds are some of the most sought after photographic subjects in our natural world. These beautiful little birds can be found nearly anywhere on the planet, and this week I'm going to show you how to attract and photograph them. I'm Doug Gardner, and your wild photo adventure starts now. Today I'm in a small patch of woods just outside a major city in a subdivision, and we're only 50 or 60 yards from a very busy highway. Today I'm going to try to attract songbirds to this area and try to photograph them. With a few easy steps, you too can attract songbirds to your own backyard. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is decide where we want to shoot. I've chosen this location for a number of different reasons. Obviously there's songbirds here because I can hear them singing. So this morning as the sun rises to my left here, it's going to arc over to the right, so I'll have good sun from sunrise to about 10:30 this morning. So that's going to be pretty good. The other thing you need to consider is the background. Now a lot of times you just need to kind of squat down to the height that your lens is going to be and just kind of visualize what the background will look like in the actual photograph. Sometimes I actually take a few test pictures just of the background to see what that's going to look like. Okay, so we've determined the area that we want to be in. Now, how do we get the birds here? Well, obviously the first thing we want to do is set up a feeder. So let's do that. For your feeder, you can be as simple with this or as elaborate as you want to be. Today, I'm just going to put up a simple feeder hanger pole, which just sticks in the ground, and a very inexpensive feeder. You can get it at any hardware store. During the fall and winter months, you can get away with pretty much just using bird seed, a good premium blend that you can buy pretty much anywhere. Now, as you move towards spring, the birds need to take things like mealworms and insects back to the nest for the young that are trying to go ahead and fledge out. For me personally, I want something natural for the bird to sit on before it comes to the feeder. So for that reason, we're going to add some natural looking perches. It can be, you could clip some dogwood limbs and attach them to this pole so it sticks off here to the side. That way you can isolate just that limb. It could be an old rotten log. It could be anything natural looking, but just attach your perch off to the side and the bird will come and sit on the nearest perch to the feeder before it actually goes to the feeder. So what you'll be doing is catching the bird as it comes in, lands on the perch, you photograph it, and then the bird will usually go to the feeder. Now, if you have your perch too far away, the bird will just fly from whatever cover it's coming from straight to the feeder, and it won't even use your perch. If it's too close, then you run the risk of actually getting parts of the feeder or the hanger in your photograph. Now, depending on where you live and the amount of birds you have in the area naturally will depend on how quick they find the feeder. Sometimes it could be days, weeks, even months before they find it. But build it and they will come. Now, for this particular perch, I don't want the background to be exactly like the background for this. This gives me multiple opportunities for different looks to my photograph. So I'm going to bring in some brush and put right here behind this and create my own background. Depending on the time of year that you're photographing, you'll have different options on what you can put in this background. We can also get some wild dogwoods and clip a little limb off, and we could put dogwoods here as our background with this being the perch. So you have a lot of flexibility and a lot of creativity when you build your own setup here. I can change how much is in focus of this background by simply moving this brush back and forth. The closer I get it to the perch, the more detail I'm going to have in my background. The further I move it away, the more blurry it's going to be. So since I'm shooting at such a large aperture right now, I think about 3 feet is going to be just fine. I want some texture in the background, but overall I want it to be a very blurred, smooth appearance. Another thing I like to do is to take my perch and drill about a 1-inch hole into the side of the perch. Now you want to drill it so that from the angle of the blind from where you're going to be shooting, you can't see the hole, but yet the bird is far enough around that you can see the entire bird. So in that hole, I'll take some of this suet and pack in that hole good and tight, and then make sure I turn it so that I can't see the suet. Okay, now we're hoping that the bird's gonna sit in this area here and sit here and get the suet. And you can come in, you can drill as many holes as you want to along the side here, fill it with suet, and you'll get woodpeckers and a variety of other birds sitting on the edge, and that's just that much more variety in your perch. The other thing we'll do is we'll take some of these mealworms, and up here in the top, I'll just put some mealworms up here in the top, and now hopefully we'll get birds sitting up here pulling mealworms out of this little cavity. You know, it's good to try to find a perch that's got all kind of little cracks and crannies that you can stuff stuff in, and that way the birds will spend some time on this, because these are fast birds. I mean, when they come in, they're not going to sit on the perch very long unless you've got something to keep them there. Okay, now that we've got our feeders, our perches, and our background taken care of, it's time to set up a blind to shoot from. Songbirds are very forgiving, because we all know that you can put a feeder right outside your house window and they'll come to it. So we're not so much worried about completely blending into the surroundings. All we want to do is conceal sudden movements. That's what spooks these birds off. Something as simple as a cloth curtain on 2 stakes between you and where the bird is feeding would be all you need. Even better would be using a pop-up hunting blind like this here. They're very inexpensive. You can pick them up at any hunting supply store for $49 now. They're easy to set up, as you can see. Anybody can do this. Just that easy. The other nice thing about this, not only is it completely hide all of your movement, it's very roomy, as you can see, and most of these materials are waterproof, so even in the rain or snow or wind, we can sit in here nice and comfortable and get great photographs of the bird. In this particular situation, I'm shooting a 500mm lens, and I know that the range of 15 to 20 feet from the perch is going to be ideal. Okay, now we're in the blind. We want to take a few test shots. You focus on the perch, and we know we want to be using an f-stop of around 5.6, somewhere in there, f4, 5.6, f8. I would stay in that range. And by doing that, we can see exactly what our background is going to look like. If we want the background to be more blurred or more in focus, then all we need to do is either adjust the background that we had put right behind our perch, or we can adjust our f-stop. F-stop controls how blurry your background is going to be. So play with that a little bit, get everything just like you want it. We'll let this sit for a few days, check on it, and come back in. Hopefully we can get some great photographs. We actually had to let the blind sit for over a week for the birds to find the feeder, but it's working out really good. We got a fair variety of birds and a fair variety of different species using the perch, so this is working out really well. Now, today I'm using a field flash. I commonly do that with songbirds. Other birds, other mammals, flash doesn't work real well because they're scared of the flash. Songbirds, it works real well because it helps you fill in shadows, especially in contrasty light. Now, because I'm using a field flash, I have to adjust my shutter speed. Now, most cameras, the flash sync speed, which is the shutter speed at which you have to have the camera set at in order for the flash to sync with it, Most cameras is 1/250th of a second. Now, some of the newer cameras, some of the professional cameras, it actually allows you to shoot 1/500th of a second as a shutter speed, and that's called high speed sync. Now, my camera does have that, so I always want the fastest shutter speed I can, so I'm using that mode, and that's real easy to set. Simply mash the plus and the minus sign at the same time, and now you see it's got a little lightning bolt with an H. That means that the flash and the camera will sync at the highest possible shutter speed, which is 1/500th of a second. Next, we want to dial down the amount of light that the flash is putting out. So we want to dial down by hitting the select button and -3 stops. So that's 2, there we go, -3. So that means the flash is putting out 3 stops less light than the ambient light coming from the sun falling on my subject. The other nice thing about field flash is on a cloudy day when you don't get that catch light or that sparkle in the animal's eye, that field flash will actually reflect out of the animal's eye, and it'll give you that little bit of eye shine, which brings life back to your image. All right, in addition to using the field flash, I've also attached a better beamer. It's a very simple apparatus that holds a little Fresnel lens right in front of the flash head, and what it does, it extends the distance that the flash is effective much further than the flash was intended to be used. So if you were normally getting 50 or 60 feet out of your flash, when you attach this Fresnel lens to it, it extends the effective range of that flash out. It also helps concentrate the light down into a smaller area. When you use the better beamer, you have to remember to zoom in your flash to 50 millimeters. Now the flash will zoom in all the way to 105 millimeters, but 50 is the recommended setting on your flash zoom for the better beamer. Another thing that's worth noting here is we're all familiar with the red eye effect, where you take a picture of somebody and their eyes appear red. Well, that is caused by the flash being mounted directly to the top of the camera, and when the light travels out, bounces off the subject and comes back, the light is traveling very close to the same route. So it's hitting the back of your retina directly and bouncing straight out, which is what creates the red eye effect. Now, by simply using a bracket or any other apparatus you want and lifting the flash up higher off of the camera, now you have changed the angle at which the light travels out and comes back in, and that will completely alleviate the problem of red eye. Now, earlier I mentioned minimal focal distance, and one way to control or reduce that minimal focal distance is by using this. This is called an extension tube. There's nothing special about it. There's no glass in it. It's completely hollow, very inexpensive, and you simply put it between the camera body and the lens. And by moving it's basically a spacer, and by moving the back element of the lens a little bit further away from the sensor of the camera, now you have greatly reduced your minimal focal distance. So now I can focus on something that may be 6, 7, 8 feet away from me. Before, the closest thing I could focus on was going to be about 15 to 18 feet. So the reason that using an extension tube is so important is because now that we've reduced the minimal focal distance, if the bird got closer so we could get those nice frame-filling images of these birds, we could focus on it at that distance. Yeah, well, this turned out really good, and I've been real pleased with the images I've gotten today. And you can do this in your own backyard. You can keep it as simple or as complicated as you want. But let's go visit a good friend of mine, Gary Carter, at his songbird habitat, and he has taken it to a much grander scale. You won't be disappointed in what you're about to see. Well, I'm here with my good buddy Gary Carter at his personal songbird habitat in his backyard. We're in Greensboro, North Carolina. Gary, it's always a treat to be here, buddy. I tell you what, I've been here before and it was a treat then, and I know you've kind of made some upgrades since then.
Yeah, there's been a few changes, and it's always good to see you.
Well, tell me a little bit about your garden and how you got into this.
Well, originally we started shooting out the bedroom window. And of course, I used to hunt and fish all the time, and then the farmers got to where they could grow houses and shopping centers better than they could crops. And so the hunting and fishing territory kind of dwindled down, and now I just hunt year-round with the camera.
I got you. Well, what got you to this magnificent songbird habitat?
Well, we realized back in the 90s that a lot of people didn't realize what they had in their backyard. Mm-hmm. So we started trying to get people to realize that there's a lot of wildlife right in their backyard. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing we had to overcome was, why do I want to go to somebody's backyard to photograph?
Right. Now, y'all are host to, what, 35 different species of birds now?
We've actually counted up at one time close to 50.
Wow. Yeah, it's a magnificent place. You've done a lot with the place. I know I was super impressed the first time I was here, and I've shot several times with you, but it's got to be just a huge amount of maintenance involved in, you know, food and just, you know, keeping up with the perches and the trees and even the blinds.
It's a 7-day-a-week affair. You got to do it and feed them at least twice a day. And it's not a cheap adventure. And we're making up our own seed mixture, our own suet, and then we supplement with peanuts. And starting in about December, we'll start buying mealworms to feed the birds for protein and that type of thing. And we're buying something like 20,000 mealworms every 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it's a songbird smorgasbord to a degree.
Absolutely.
And I think they go out and tell some other birds, hey, you know, you get a free meal over there.
Absolutely.
And they're wild birds, but they are habituated to people. And I got mannequins in the blind, as you well know.
I noticed that. So you started out by using the mannequins, putting the mannequins in the windows of the blinds so the birds would get used to somebody sitting there. That's genius. I was looking at the blinds earlier. It looks like you can hold quite a few photographers at one time.
We try to basically hold it to, you know, about 7. There's 4 to 5 can shoot comfortably out front, and we got 3 windows in the back. The birds are going to be somewhere within about 20 foot of you, most all the time.
Great.
And most people are not used to the songbirds being that close, or bird watchers that come here.
Do you have any tips for people trying to get into bird photography?
Well, we have a lot of photographers that come here to look, and then they want to go back and try to start something themselves, and we encourage that. But the main thing is, once they start feeding, they got to keep the feeding up. It's a year-round thing. And we went to a little extra length of providing them a variety of food. And because the woodpeckers like one thing, the songbirds may like something else. The finches may like thistle seed.
Keep that variety.
Variety out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing that we try to provide, you know, birds are no different than you and I. Not only do you have to provide the food, but they need water. And they come in and drink the water, and they bathe in the water, and also they got to have a place to live. So with the woods, the brush piles, and all of that we have around, or the bird houses we have up, that's providing the habitat. So you got to have those 3 things to keep them in the area.
And you're a certified wildlife habitat, correct?
That's correct.
And that's issued through who?
The National Wildlife Federation.
Wow, that's a pretty big accomplishment just in itself. I mean, they don't just give that away.
No, we had to prove that we had those 3 things, and that the habitat was here for the birds.
Well, I tell you what, this is really spectacular. I'm sure your guests come away with some fabulous shots. How far away do your guests come from? I mean, you do workshops?
We basically can say we've had them from
all over the world.
All over the world.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Well, Gary, this is fantastic. Could you take me for a tour of the garden?
We'll even do better than that. Let's go down there and shoot some birds.
That sounds like a winner. Another nice thing about photographing songbirds in a songbird habitat is that you have so many varieties of backgrounds, and I don't even have to physically move myself. So if I want a mockingbird on azaleas, all I gotta do is, you know, photograph that opportunity right here. If I want a goldfinch on a dogwood bloom, all I gotta do is turn my camera over here and I have that particular scenario. Or if I just want to use one of the natural logs with any variety of birds using it, it's just, you know, it's just a matter of moving the lens and changing the scene completely. Oh, we've got some birds here taking a bath. Having the little water feature here in front of me is really nice. Birds come down here and drink, and you can get some pretty cool shots of them bathing. Songbirds, they're such cool little creatures, and I thoroughly enjoy photographing them. I hope you've enjoyed this week's show and learned a little more about how you too can attract and photograph songbirds in your own backyard. More information about this week's show and Gary Carter's songbird habitat is available online. And remember, it's not just about the photograph, it's the outdoor experience. I'm Doug Gardner for Wild Photo Adventures. Thank you for joining me on another Wild Photo Event. That's not right. Songbirds are some of the most with a few easy steps, you too can. Obviously, I know there's birds here. I can hear them singing right now. I'm sorry, that bird's right above my head and he kind of startled me. Mockingbird magnifies the amount of light that you flash. I hope you've enjoyed this week's show and learned a little more. Well, I'd already put a couple adjectives and verbs and nouns and pronouns and double negatives in there, so. Songbirds, they're such cool little creatures, and I thoroughly take 243,000. I hope you've enjoyed this week's show and learned a little more about songbird photography. Give up!